Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Yasmina Greco. I'm with O'Reilly Media, and I will be your host for today's webcast. Today, folks, we have Jonathan Stark with us, and he's going to talk to us all about The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, Wearable Computers, Smart Objects, and the Death of the Touchscreen. Jonathan is a best-selling O'Reilly author, and he has several books. His Building iPhone Apps with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript is available in 7 languages, and Building Android Apps with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript 2nd edition is also one of the best-selling books. Jonathan is a mobile consultant, web evangelist, and confessed techno-utopian who believes that wireless computing will transform every aspect of human society. Many of you may be familiar with his Jonathan's Card experiment that made international headlines by combining mobile payments with social giving to create a pay-it-forward coffee movement at Starbucks locations all over the United States. Folks, we're really excited to have Jonathan with us today to present this webcast for you all. Okay, as we get the event started, I would like to go over a little housekeeping to help you get the most out of today's webcast. First, you'll want to open your group chat widget if you haven't already done so. This is where we can interact with each other during the event and where you can submit your questions for Jonathan. We find that our audience usually has a lot of good knowledge to share, so we encourage you all to chat freely during the event. However, if you have questions for Jonathan, please preface them with a capital letter Q so we know that they're for him and we can make sure we see it for Q&A. You can also open, move, and resize any of the other widgets. If you'd like to tweet from the Twitter widget today, you might need to give it permission to access your account. Today, folks, our hashtag looks like it's going to be revolution. So #revolution is the hashtag for tweeting today. Also, if you should have any trouble with the event, please make sure you have apps that you don't need running are closed, and you can try refreshing your window, and that may help you with your audio and your visual site with the slides. Folks, we'd like to let you know we are recording the webcast, and we will have the archive ready usually within 48 hours. And now it's my pleasure to turn the program over to Jonathan for his presentation. Hello, Jonathan.
Hi, Yas. Thanks. Welcome, everyone, to The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. Today I'm going to talk about wearable computers, smart objects, and the death of the touchscreen. Really want to make 2 points while we're together. First, I want to make the case that we're due for a revolutionary personal computing device in the relatively near future. And then I want to share 3 ways that we can prepare for this future device. And as an added bonus, these 3 techniques are also really useful for dealing with the fragmented mobile landscape that we're dealing with right now that we have today. So I suppose as any good talk about the future, I need to start with the past so we have a little context for the predictions. So in 2007, Apple introduced the iPhone, and it has so thoroughly transformed our world that it's kind of hard to remember what things were like before it. Back in the day, computers were not the kind of thing you carried around in your pocket. It was a room-sized bunch of devices that was outside of the range of ownership for anything but really large universities and government institutions. But in the 70s, mid-70s or so, we started getting desktop computers or personal computers, and these are your typical, green text on a black screen, CRT monitors. One on the slide here is a Radio Shack TRS-80, which is one of the ones I learned BASIC on in high school, which may tell you how old I am. But this was not a very user-friendly device. It was just a text interface. There was no GUI, graphical user interface. That came along in the mid-'80s when Apple introduced the first Mac. And they pretty much nailed it right out of the gate. They had this graphical user interface and a mouse pointer and keyboard, and this became the paradigm for the desktop computer, the personal computer, really until today. It hasn't really changed that much. Certainly, we've gotten fancy cosmetic changes and improvements in performance and hard drive space and all these sort of attributes, but we didn't really get a change to sort of operational modes or the modes that we interact with the device. Around the same time as the desktop computer was working its way into everyone's homes, there was this thing called the Internet that was starting to catch on kind of under the radar. And people started to get it in the workplace, and people started to receive these AOL CDs in the mail, and you could get dial-up and connect to this Internet thing and get on the web. And that started to, people loved it. It caught on like crazy. Perhaps email was the killer app of the Internet. Perhaps maybe even today you could still say that. But what ended up happening was people had these computers at home that were not connected to anything. You could just sort of use Mac Paint or whatever, maybe move files around on a disk. But once people started to get a taste of this always-on connectivity, or at least often-on connectivity, they started to desire it everywhere, outside of the workplace, at home. And the Internet at the time, the number of connections started to grow and reach almost literally sort of organically grow, down our streets and across our oceans, and start to connect all of these devices. These sort of tendrils reached into our houses. It really grew almost like an organism. Around that time, we started to hear words like telecommuting and portables and Wi-Fi. I remember when I first saw the term Wi-Fi, I didn't understand what it was. Like, what's a hotspot? It doesn't even make sense. And of course, it was at a Starbucks. And you started to see people in coffee shops with laptop computers connected to the Internet, doing work from all over the place. So it was clear, based on people's behavior, that this notion of being connected to the network was an attractive thing. People were spending a lot of money and going to a lot of effort to make sure that they were connected to the Internet. RIM, or BlackBerry, sort of capitalized on this by with their BlackBerry devices that allowed people to access their email from anywhere that they could get a cell phone connection. So this was very addictive. People started calling them crackberries. It was a total cliche. You'd see people with BlackBerries just constantly staring down at their phones or in line. Now we're all doing that, but at the time it was really just the BlackBerry users. And I remember being really jealous of this. Like, I'm not sure why I wanted to check my email all the time, but I definitely did. And these and RIM really capitalized on this. It became quite popular. The thing was, other than checking your email or maybe using BVM or making an actual phone call, the device's OS was really painful, and the web browsing experience was ridiculous. Not necessarily BlackBerry's fault. The web wasn't the way it is now, but it really wasn't a useful experience. It was often easier to just say, it's going to take me 15 minutes to get this website up. I can get back to my desktop computer faster than I can do that, so I'll just wait until I get back to my office to, go to Wikipedia or wherever you wanted to go back then. I suppose it would have been like Yahoo or something, or CNN, as you can see here. So that was kind of the environment in 2007 when Apple launched the iPhone. And the iPhone, remember, Apple was at the time strictly a computer company. I guess they made the iPod too, but they're really Apple Computer. And then out of nowhere, they launched this phone, and they basically nuke both BlackBerry or RIM and Nokia. Just came out of nowhere and tore it open. again, it's hard to remember how radical this phone was. I actually cut together a 2-minute highlight reel of the Steve Jobs announcement. You can search for it on YouTube, Jonathan Stark on YouTube. And it's almost jaw-dropping to remember how radical things that we take for granted now were at the time. Like pinch to zoom got practically a standing ovation, when he's showing the photo application. And when you think about it now, like, how else would you do it? It seems obvious that a pinch gesture would zoom a photo, like duh. But at the time, it was like breathtaking. At the very beginning of the presentation, he swipes to unlock the phone, and the crowd audibly gasps and starts clapping. And if you think about how many times you do that on your phone now, it's like a muscle memory thing. It's completely ingrained into our physical behavior. I've seen statistics that the average smartphone user pulls their phone out of their pocket 150 times a day. So it just continues to demonstrate that people desire this connectivity. They want to be connected all the time, at any time, and in fact on any device. So they really, really want to be connected all the time. So that brings us up to the present. This is a graph of the iPhone sales from 2007 to present. As you can see, it's been increasing rapidly. And the iPhone has really changed our behavior in every aspect of our lives. But even as awesome as it is and as popular as it is, and of course the other smartphones that have come with it, I think they still have significant limitations. Here you can see a picture. I love this picture. It's the difference. This is the papal announcement in Rome. You can see in 2005 there were there's virtually no screens. You can see one or two, and then 2013 it's like a Christmas tree. Just the whole place lit up. There's even a guy with an iPad there. Kind of funny. There's one other thing I want to point out about smartphone or mobile computing. I want to call it a shift that took place because I think a new shift is coming. So if we look at this picture, you can see these folks on a subway, and there's something radical about this, which is that, first of all, a number of people are computing with one hand. And in fact, there's also one woman who's computing standing up. And this is not the way computing was done. From the beginning of the first computer, that gigantic room-sized computer that I showed at the beginning, for example, up until 2007, the posture for computing was seated, facing a monitor with two hands on your desktop. So you're either on your keyboard or on your mouse. That was the computing posture. You didn't really compute standing up. You certainly didn't compute standing in line. When the iPhone came along, this became the new posture, where you've got basically one eye and one thumb. You got something else in your other hand, whether it's a baby or a coffee or what have you. This is the new computing model, or posture, I should say. This is the new computing posture, or certainly a new computing posture. All right, so that brings us up to what I think the future is going to bring, because yay, as awesome as the iPhone is, like I started to say before, it still has some significant limitations. And when I say iPhone, I mean modern smartphones, so I shouldn't say iPhone. So even I'm actually an Android guy, and all of these smartphones are just totally amazing, but they have some significant limitations. For example, so wait for my slides to catch up. So here's the awesome iPhone. But the awesome iPhone, you can't really use your smartphone while you are doing dishes, for example, because your hands are occupied, and not to mention wet, which is a complication. You can't use a phone while you're raking leaves, or changing a baby, or jumping across a chasm with rollerblades on your arms. There are a lot of times when you think about it during the day when your eyes are not free. So virtually everything that a modern smartphone does, not everything, but almost everything, requires that you look at it. And the other thing is that almost everything you do with it requires a hand or a thumb, which means that there are large portions of your day where you cannot connect to the internet using your phone. And this, I get pushback on this sometimes because it's like, no, we're always on our phones. We're always connecting to the internet. We're always checking email and messaging and Facebook and Snapchat and everything else. But you're really not. If you think about it like I do, there are tons of times when you are disconnected from the network. And as I went through at the beginning here, there's society has demonstrated, people have demonstrated that they are willing to go to significant expense to get connected in more and more places. This is a desirable thing. Now that cloud computing has really tipped and become a thing, not just that we talk about, but that normal people use in their everyday lives, things like Dropbox or Facebook or all sorts of Google properties. We're essentially outsourcing pieces of our brain to the internet. So when we're disconnected, in some sense, it's almost like a bit of brain damage, and it's an uncomfortable feeling. And I'll give you a story. I'll bet you many people who are listening have a similar story, but I live in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm about an hour south by train of Boston, and I recently had a meeting in Boston. And, I grabbed my bag, and I went down to the train, and I went up to Boston. I had no idea who I was meeting. I didn't know where I was going. I knew the company name. I didn't have the person's contact information that I was going to. I didn't have the address. I didn't have anything with me physically because I knew it was on my phone. Like, why would I look at it or memorize it or write it down when I've got my phone with me? So I arrive in Boston, and of course, I'm not sure what was going on, but I couldn't get a cellular signal anywhere. So I was just stuck. I had no idea. I had no choice but to sort of wander the streets looking for an open Wi-Fi, and which is tough to do these days, I'll tell you, at least in Boston. But eventually I found one and was able to locate that information. But that was, I think in a very real sense, that was a piece of my brain, or my memory at least, maybe not my thinking, not my thought processing power, but my memory banks are externalized. It very much. I don't know the phone number of my mother-in-law. I don't know anyone's phone number. It's stored in this digital device, and at least in my case, it's in the cloud. It's not locally on my devices. So the point of going through that is to emphasize that being connected always is where we're going. Being disconnected is bad, and it feels bad. It provokes a negative emotional response. So how can we be connected all the time? How can we be connected when we're doing the dishes, for example? And when I first gave this talk, it was the first version of this talk was about a year ago, and not a lot of people knew what this slide was. Hopefully you're seeing slide 33, and there's a girl wearing Google Glass. But now everybody knows what this is. It's hit mainstream consciousness in a big way when the developer editions were released. Even the U.S. Congress is getting in on the action. All sorts of people are demanding that Google, provide devices and explain what they're going to do about privacy and the camera always being on and that sort of thing. But and we'll see how that goes. I think it's cool. I don't think everyone's going to think it's cool, and I don't know that this particular device will catch on. But I promise you, something like this will catch on. And the characteristics of this that are most interesting are the fact that it is a hands-free and heads-up display that does give you visual information, and it does support touch, but it's not a touch screen. And it's interesting to hear people talk about the experience of wearing glass. Unfortunately, I don't have one, but I follow a bunch of people who do, and I see a common theme when people first try them. They're shocked, like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then about 5 minutes later, they're bored of it because they're like, well, it's just notifications. Like you can't play with it. You can't, and then they start to have this sort of dip in interest. But then if you wear it for a little while, it seems that everyone has the same experience when they do finally take it off after wearing it for a day or so, which is that they feel, words they use are like naked or stupid. They feel dumb because once you sit with it, once you use it for a while, you don't think about the information. You don't think like, oh, I'm going to check my notifications and pull out your phone and swipe to open it and swipe down to see your notifications to find out why your phone just buzzed. You just know. You just glance and you just know that someone just texted you. You just know that there's a thunderstorm coming. You just know that there's a deal at the Starbucks you're walking by. And you forget that you looked at it. It's just in your brain. So whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, I promise you that it will be an addictive thing and that people will want that kind of experience. Maybe it will be a completely different form factor, but a different kind of wearable. This is the iWatch that was announced this morning. Just kidding. This was not announced this morning. It's a mock-up that of a potential wearable watch. This appears to be like some kind of touchscreen device, but the point of this is that it would create glanceable kind of information that is on your wrist. I'm not a huge fan of the watch concept, but it does sort of address the hands-free issue of being able to just glance down and know things. It still requires eyeballs, of course, but it doesn't necessarily require touch interaction to. You don't have to reach into your pocket and pull it out, is my point. So who knows what else is coming out? I honestly think that there is. I wouldn't be surprised if Apple were working on a product that combined their Earpods with Siri, that allowed you to sort of do Siri-like or voice commands without having the actual device. So if you imagine a pair of headphones that are, it's like earbuds have this sort of Y-shaped wire. You get the sort of one wire going up to each ear and then the one wire going down to the phone. Well, what if in a couple of years you could just clip that wire that goes to the phone? What if you could just clip that off and just have the earpods, just the buds connected together with a little bit of battery and a little bit of connectivity, and you could talk to it and it would tell you things. Or you didn't even have to talk to it. It just listened to what was going on around you and it would suggest answers. So you could say something like, you could be having a conversation with someone and it would notice that you said, who is the guy that starred in Doctor Who Season 7? And you'd be having a conversation and you wouldn't even be thinking about the computer in your ear and it would just say, Matt Smith. And it would give you that piece of information. And I think over time it would be less and less a conscious thing where you just start to know things. You'd start to have answers in real time. And this, maybe the device sounds a little bit sci-fi, but the computing power is here. Google Now is already doing this. If you haven't used Google Now, I would suggest you try it because it's almost spookily helpful. It's almost kind of creepy how it knows that, you're on your way to work, and you're about to be on your way to work, and it tells you that there's traffic or this sort of thing. I actually had an experience a couple of weeks ago where we got in the car and we were pulling out of the driveway. It was a Saturday, and we were going to go to a local garden store, which we, maybe go to once a month to pick up some stuff for the yard. And I pulled out my phone. I was in the passenger seat, and I pulled out my phone to check get like a Google map of the directions, or there was something else, adjacent to the place we needed directions for. And I opened up the phone, and it had a map to the place we were going already pulled up for me, which is super spooky because I wasn't in my, I use Google for basically everything, but it wasn't in my calendar that we were going there. We hadn't hardly left our driveway, so we weren't even pointing in the right direction yet. It's a mystery to me how it knew that's where we were going, but it guessed that's where we were going, and it was right. And the more and more you use Google now, or at least I do, the less and less I do Google searches, which is super interesting. So the point being is that the computing power in the cloud is starting to take shape. Google has it. Maybe someday Apple will get Siri to this point. But this sort of ambient search or predictive search is a very, very powerful thing. We know that Google Glass it's got a front-facing camera pointed at your eyeball that can potentially, it's not 100% clear what it's for, but if you look in the code for the Glass API, you can blink to take pictures and trigger the camera by doing things with your eye. There are things like the Connect, which are always listening so that it can respond to wake up when you tell it commands. The new Google announced at Google I/O that the new Chrome browser, it's not released yet, but there's a Chrome browser is going to have something called hot words, where you're on your laptop computer and you just say, okay, Google, how tall is President Obama, or whatever it is. What time is the nearest, what time is Star Trek playing at the nearest theater? And you don't even have to touch your computer. It will just Google that for you, and the results will come up, and certain kinds of responses it will read back to you. So you can totally see where they're going with this. It's incredibly powerful and incredibly interesting. And you might say, well, why would I use voice search on a computer that has a keyboard? That was actually the question that I had. I was like, oh, this is kind of interesting, but maybe a little gimmicky. Why would I not just type my search? And I got the answer to that question when my 3-year-old saw me testing it. And he just started doing searches on my browser, on my computer. Now, he's totally comfortable with an iPad or an iPhone. No problem there because it's a touch interface, but anything with a keyboard or a mouse is still a mystery to him. So as soon as he saw that you could just talk to the computer, all of a sudden he was using my computer. And I think that is a significant point. This voice interface is extremely intuitive, maybe as intuitive or more intuitive than touch, and it's something that anyone can use. Lots more people can use. You don't have to be literate. You don't have to have hands. You can just do it by talking. Okay, so I hope I've impressed upon everyone that that crazy things are in store. Some of them are coming already, and some of them are still the realm of sci-fi. Now I want to shift gears and talk about what we can do today to make our lives easier when that, what I think is an inevitability, happens. But these are also things that will help us today, because we've got a really significantly fragmented landscape today in terms of, if you're doing any kind of web development, you are, sort of nightmare scenario of having to support every kind of device from the size of like a Saltine all the way up to a picture window. How do I build a web page that's going to work on such a wide range of screen sizes, some of which are touch, some of which are mouse, some of which are both. It's such a wide range of devices now that we really need to come up with a new way to do web development anyway, and I would argue maybe application development in general. And there are a few things, 3 things I'm going to suggest that we can do today that will make that a lot easier for both project today and in the future. All right, the first one I call smart content. I don't love that name, but I can't come up with anything better. But the concept of smart content, there are a few bullet points to know about. Up until the iPhone was released, so the era of the modern smartphone, we really were building device-specific websites without realizing it. We were building desktop websites. We all sort of agreed as a group of web developers and designers that, first the minimum resolution that we should expect on a device is 800 by 600, and then as a group we all kind of looked around and said, we can creep up to 1024 by 768, right? But really we were just sort of imagining that we had control over that, and it was sort of an illusion. When the iPhone came out, it became a really popular thing. This illusion was smashed in a big way because traffic was, you could see even early statistics were showing that mobile phone web browsing traffic was skyrocketing, going from 0 to 60. It continues to do so as more and more people in the world get on the internet. People who never even have used a desktop computer, they're just going to be phone only from day one. So this number is just going to continue to climb. And so what did everyone do? To respond to that, they're like, God, our bloated desktop site doesn't really work that great on my iPhone. What should we do? Okay, let's make an M.dot site. We'll make a mobile site. It'll be nice and clean and light and small, and it'll be awesome. And then we'll just sort of do some sniffing on the server side, and we'll direct them to either the M.dot site or the www site. And that worked okay. It was a little tough to maintain two sites. People didn't love that, but yeah, you could make it work. Then the iPad came out, and that kind of blew that out of the water. We're like, geez, now we need a tablet site, because maybe we could use our desktop site from a layout standpoint, but it's not touch optimized, so the targets are too small, and people are clicking on the wrong thing, and they're getting annoyed. So let's make a T.dot site. And then the iPad mini came out, and it was like, okay, now we need to make a 7-inch site. We've been ignoring the Kindle, and we've been ignoring the Galaxy 7, but if Apple does it, we better look at this iPad mini. What are we going to do there? So all of a sudden it just doesn't scale to have a site for every kind of device. It's obvious now. It wasn't obvious at the time. And the issue, a big issue, before you even talk about the design, is the content itself. So lots of web content is stored in things like WordPress or Drupal or other things that are called CMSs, but really are used more like web publishing tools. And the problem with using a CMS as a web publishing tool is that you're prone to embed layout-specific logic into your content itself. So you kind of pollute your data with things like BR tags, line returns, rich text, like RTF, all sorts, these sorts of things that made sense when we were only publishing that snippet of content to our desktop www site. But as soon as you try and repurpose that for a new site, you're like, oh, all my lines are breaking in the wrong place. What's going on there? Oh, someone inserted all these BR tags in the actual article or the product description. And that is a major problem. That's a huge stumbling block for companies who have a large database of information that's polluted with layout instructions. So what we need to do instead is think about content in an output agnostic way that can be reused anywhere. So a couple of things to think about. First, smart content is going to have metadata that describes what it's about. It's going to have additional information that may or may not get used in the particular application you're working on. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you were working on a product database, a product CMS for yourself or for a customer. It would make sense to have things like short, medium, and long headlines, for example, not just one headline or not just one product name. If you were working on a blogging engine, it might make sense to have the same sort of thing, like short, medium, and long titles, or metadata about, obviously you're going to have metadata about when it was published, who it was published by. You might even have a longer version of the content. Say like here's the long form article, but here's a snippet. So that sort of chunk of data that defines the atomic unit of whatever it is you're working on has these sort of constellation of information floating around the core atom or the core unit that different people can use in different ways depending on their context. So in other words, you don't decide in the database, you don't make any decisions about how it's going to be displayed. You just provide data in different lengths perhaps that people who are making decisions about a particular layout, they can pull from, and you can maintain your brand voice and your consistency, and let them pick and choose the pieces that they're going to assemble and how they're going to assemble them on the front end, based on maybe screen size or whether or not a high-resolution display or touch versus mouse pointer or whatever. But that's a decision that should be made on the front end, not in the back end. So that is a very big deal. Next thing, so that was the first thing, is scrub your content, get it nice and clean, add metadata to it so the people on the front end can make decisions about what to use. The next thing, which is a very big deal, is creating open APIs. And once you've got your data all scrubbed up and clean and it's ready to go out on its own and be good in whatever situation it finds itself in, because we no longer have control over that, we need a way to allow people to access that content or services if you're providing a service. And the way to do that is with APIs. And I would argue that they should be open APIs whenever possible that default to as open as possible at all times. So there are a bunch of benefits of this. First, at least I would do most of my work with large organizations. So inside of a large organization, there are tons of data silos. And it's a huge stumbling block for moving from the desktop era into the sort of more modern era where everyone wants real-time, all-the-time access to their data, anywhere on any device. You can't really do that when say, you've got a customer table in the loyalty system, you've got a customer table in the transactional POS system, you've got a customer table in the .com system. You get all these customer tables all over the place. They probably have different logins. There's no single view, brand-wide view of you as a customer, and that's a major problem because as people switch modes between, say, the desktop site and maybe a native app, if they're not talking to the same back end, there's going to be a really frustrating disconnect. Also, since these devices are so portable, so mobile, we get this sort of cognitive dissonance between retail, bricks and mortar retail, and e-commerce, where I could be in a J.Crew, physical J.Crew, but shopping on their website, and want those two experiences to seamlessly blend. Like maybe I want to scan the barcode on a shirt that's my size but not the color I want and buy it on their website. Well, that becomes really difficult to do when the back ends aren't the same. Because it doesn't. There's no connection there. There's like no way to do it. And in fact, that's a separate topic. But I think that's a sort of organizational problem that needs to be solved because most likely the retail SVP and the .com SVP are probably competing with each other financially. For incentivized to compete with each other. So they don't want to share data across the organization. But that's a separate topic. The point is that the way to break down these silos is to set up APIs. So in a large organization, these different departments could exchange data programmatically without having to have a meeting with anybody. They just have APIs where different departments can either view the documentation or whatever and just get access to that data. There should be no need of assistance from the publishing party whatsoever. Once the API is up, it should be accessible to whoever makes sense to make it accessible to, although I would argue that you should default to as public as possible. Okay. Oops. All right, so once you've got your content all cleaned and you've got APIs to access that content or your services, you're probably going to want to build an interface. That is probably a graphical interface. Maybe it's going to be a website. Maybe it's going to be a mobile website, or maybe not. Maybe it's going to be a native application. Maybe the data is going to be accessed from car stereo systems, and the data is going to be displayed on an LCD screen in a car. Whatever it is, you want to look across the range of existing devices or near future devices that are potentially going to use your service or your content or services, and start with the most resource-constrained one that is reasonable. And I'm being really pragmatic here. I'm not saying you should build every time you build an API, you should, first thing you should do is build a client on top of it that's for the, a car stereo, if your content doesn't make any sense on a car stereo. So pick a context or a device context that is the most small, the smallest screen, let's say, or the smallest processing power, or the worst bandwidth, whatever it is, and design the experience around that. Design the client for that device first, and pull your data from the API and construct your user interface for that device first. Once you have that done and you've got that all kind of polished up, start building up from there. So in the real world, most of the time it's not going to be the LCD screen for a car. Most of the time we're going to be talking about a mobile website or a native mobile application is going to be your smallest device. So sort of like Luke W's mobile first credo. So for most people, that's what it'll be. And then you can work your way up from that small screen experience. Maybe you use responsive design to work your way up to a larger experience, or maybe you decide that you still are going to build multiple different websites. But whatever, it's really, really hard. I can tell you from experience, it's very difficult to shoehorn from a big experience down into a small one. It's much easier to start with a small experience and work your way up to a big one. For many technical reasons, on a website, it's just the CSS works better additively. It's not a good subtractive technology, so it's much harder to take things away. I'm not going to say harder. It's tedious to try and subtract the CSS from a site. It's much easier to add CSS to a site, and it's way easier to go from small to large with CSS. It's also, from an organizational standpoint, it's also much easier to go from small to large because you have to, the toughest editorial decisions come in the small environment. So once those decisions are made in the small environment, it's easy to scale up when you have more, say, screen real estate, for example. But if you do the reverse and you start with a desktop site where you've got all this sort of real estate, you never have to have the hard conversations about what's going to be below the fold or what's not going to make it onto the home page, because a ton of stuff fits on the home page, and you come up with this design and you think you're done, and then it's like, okay, let's do the mobile version, and you go down and you're like, oh, wait a second, we can't jam all this in here, and even if we do, something has to go at the top. So these two things that were next to each other on the home page, one of them has to take precedence, and now all of a sudden you have to have a whole new round of meetings with the client, or whether it's an internal client or an external client. So I promise you, if you start with the smallest client application experience, whatever it might be, and work your way up, you'll be a lot better off. Here are the bullet points on that. So the good news is that these three things, smart content, open APIs, and starting small, these three things benefit us immediately today from the standpoint of accessibility. And I don't just mean accessibility like visually impaired or whatever. I mean just the broader context of people being able to access your content. So right now there's something like 2 billion people connected to the internet, and by 2020 it's supposed to be a lot closer to the remaining 5 billion getting online. And as those markets start to come online, you're going to want to be able to provide experiences to them. I mean, that's like the nature of the web. You want your people to see your stuff. I mean, that's kind of the point. So accessibility in that broader sense, I think, is a very big deal, and I think it's good for business. I think it's good for people in general. I just think it's a good thing overall. Like, more access is better. And I suppose that's debatable, but that's my personal opinion. And I definitely believe that that's where we're going, whether you like it or not. So I like this quote from Eric Schmidt. I kind of want to close with this, but he says that we're going from almost no one having any kind of information and access to libraries to virtually everyone having access to every piece of information in the world. And that is an enormous accomplishment for humanity. I couldn't agree with this more. I it's easy for me, I'm 44, it's easy for me to remember what it was like to have to go to a library and look through a card catalog, to go find a book on a shelf, to pull it out, to open it up, to look through the index, to flip through pages, to find the articles I wanted, to go over to a Xerox machine, to get change out of my pocket, put a bunch of dimes in the machine, Xerox a bunch of pages. It was a half a day to find what amounts to one Wikipedia article now, which I can find in like under a second. It's crazy. So now if you imagine that all those things that are known or learned and are shared on, let's just pick Wikipedia, imagine that everybody or close to everybody could get access to that information, not have to learn it on their own, not have to start from scratch every time, all these people in these sort of isolated sort of knowledge vacuums having to figure all this stuff out that's been figured out. Wouldn't it be awesome? Or what will the world be like when that's nobody's wasting their time figuring out stuff that's been figured out. It's already been done. The answers are there. And we can free up all of those human mental cycles for more creativity, which is what humans are awesome at. So not wasting time memorizing math tables or, figuring out how to make a windmill. It's done. There's plans. Just go get them and then figure out something way cooler that you could do with the windmill once you made it. Do something new instead of everybody just figuring out the same thing over and over. I think it's just going to revolutionize every aspect of society, top to bottom, from government, religion, entertainment, commerce, everything. So as these more people get connected, you want your services to be available, on whatever device they happen to be on, whenever they happen to look for it. And these techniques will help you in that, what I think is the inevitable future. So that's what I have for you. I hope you don't think I'm too crazy. And if you have any questions, you can always, we'll take questions now. We've got some time for that, but you can also always ping me on Twitter. And if you'd like to subscribe to my mailing list, once a month or so I send out links and free stuff and videos and that sort of thing. So we'd love it if you signed up there too. All right, Yaz, I'll turn it back over to you and see if you have any questions queued up.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions that have come in, as you can imagine, and very good conversations going on about your topic here in the group chat. So folks, will take questions in the order they came in, and we will start with Ricardo's question. How do you think products like Google Wallet or other payment methods through cell phones will evolve in this new revolution?
Yeah, I have some personal experience with this, but Jonathan's card thing that you mentioned earlier. A couple of things. I think, first of all, SMS payments are going to be bigger first. It's already a big thing, say in Africa, where people can pay their employees over SMS. People can exchange. There's all sorts of crazy things going on with featured phones where people are figuring out ways to exchange money, even if it's just topping up a SIM card with minutes and using that as currency to transfer back and forth to people. I bought minutes on this card, here's the card, and that's become a method of trade. There's also some crazy stuff going on with Bitcoin, which is it's basically over my head. I can barely keep up with it. But the thing with Bitcoin is that it allows anonymous purchases on the internet, which is there's no way to make an anonymous purchase on the internet right now. So that's going on, and then you've got all these wallet things going on with Android in particular. Google Wallet's an obvious one, but also Square is doing some really amazing things in this space. It seems clear that we're going in the direction of getting rid of currency. I think Turkey already announced that by 2025 they're going to have no more physical currency. And the direction we're going in, right now things like NFC are horrible. They don't work. So it needs to be something really a lot more simple, it's something really simple like SMS or scanning a barcode that's displayed on a phone. But the more high-tech solutions like NFC, it's just not ready for prime time. I assure you it will be. I'm not sure how long it'll take because I don't have a sense of how long it'll take because banks are such a a weird sort of complicated thing. But I would pay attention to Square, what Square is doing, because they are really tearing it up. They've got some really innovative solutions that are drop dead simple. They just work. So that's probably the near future, but the mid-range future. But the near future is going to be all about SMS payments, especially in developing markets.
Great, thank you. Next question here from Michael Jones. Jonathan, are you familiar with the term smart dust? What are your thoughts on the future of smart clothes and wearable embedded sensors?
Yeah, I am familiar with smart dust. The concept is that it's basically nano-sized, self-organizing particles, and that totally sounds sci-fi, even to me. But you see developments in those areas. Like there's some biotech stuff going that scares the pants off me. There's some really crazy things going on that as a society or as a global society we're going to have to wrestle with the moral implications of, and it's just going to be one of those processes where we have to work through like what is morally what's moral, like what's right and wrong when it comes to cloning and as proper cyborg technology. Like if I can replace my eyes with a camera, then am I not going to be allowed in some places because the same reason that people are getting all worked up about the Google Glass camera? But there's just, sorry, I got so stuck on smart dust. Can you make the question again?
Michael just asked if you're familiar with that term, and what are your thoughts on the wearable clothes that have the embedded sensors?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot that part. All right, so wearables, to me, wearables is where all the innovation is going to be in the next 2 years or so. So I feel like the modern smartphone, Apple nailed it out of the gate. It's matured. We're not going to get a lot of innovation on what we consider today to be a smartphone. Maybe we'll get some gimmicky stuff like a projected keyboard or holographic display, but I think it's basically dialed. No pun intended. The next thing is going to be wearables like Google Glass, the Momoto camera, if Apple comes up with a watch, the Pebble watch, and these are basically all peripherals that use your phone as a brain or a communications channel, and that needs to change, but it'll be that way for the next year, 2 years probably. But you see a lot of these. It'll probably come in through sports. A lot of them will come in through sports or athletes that are looking for high performance, looking to really have behavioral analytics of the physical world in real time. There's a Google Glass competitor from a company called Recon. They have these glasses called Jet glasses that are specifically targeted at athletes that are pretty amazing. And I believe they'll be in the market this year. You get the Jawbone bracelet, you get the Fuel Band, Fitbit, and so wearable is going to be a big thing. They're going to be connected, and the other big thing is Internet of Things is starting to catch on. There are more and more devices, at least around my house, that talk to the Internet and talk to each other, and over services on the Internet like IFTTT. So there's just going to be more and more things getting connected. Smart devices are going to be cropping up everywhere, but I think wearables is where all of the really interesting stuff is going to happen for the next 1 to 3 years, not so much smartphones.
Great, thank you very much. Let's see, lots of folks still sending in questions. Perfect, thank you so much. A few folks asking now, Jonathan, what are your thoughts about privacy issues around all this?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think that this is going to get fought out in court. I have a personal opinion about it, that it's just, I realize it's just my personal opinion and there are good reasons to disagree with me, but I think the concerns about Google Glass recording, people in public is kind of silly, if that's what he's referring to, because it's like you can already do this really. It's like they're actually much more, they're much better devices that are much better at surreptitiously recording people, that an average person can use. I also think that with the more and more surveillance happening from police and government in general, I would think that average citizens would want to be able to basically have the same thing. It's clear to me that it's a big deal to a lot of people. I don't understand the reasoning other than just the old man get off my lawn type of thing. The whole thing about cameras in a bathroom, that's just ridiculous. It's like what'll happen, let's say Google Glass becomes really popular. We will develop social behavior around it that's appropriate, the same way we do with Bluetooth, or the same thing we do with iPod headphones or some regular sunglasses. You don't stand there talking to someone with regular sunglasses on indoors. You put them on your head because it would be rude, unless you're like, I don't know, Kanye West or something. So we'll just do stuff like we'll take them off, we'll put them on our head, or we'll whatever. It'll just become a thing that people just do to not be rude. The bigger privacy implications are just like, a couple of years ago, I just basically decided that everything that I do is going to be online, so I'd better not do anything I don't want to have online, and that's the way I deal with it. But that's not fair. I live in a free society, and a lot of people don't, and they don't have that luxury to just be like, oh, I'm going to do whatever I want whenever I want. So that's a tough one. There's no answer. We're just going to fight it out in court, I suppose.
Thank you very much. Now lots of questions coming in about programming languages for the future. Ravasara is asking, what are your thoughts on XSL-based languages like XSLT, XPath, and XSLFO?
Wow, that's rad. That's a crazy question. Those are useful technologies. I think that I don't really have an opinion on those, but I can tell you that whenever someone is getting into programming or getting excited about programming, they ask me what to learn, I always say JavaScript, because it's the thing that runs absolutely everywhere. Now it runs on server side, it runs on embedded devices, it runs everywhere. So I would say learn JavaScript. Nothing against other languages. I just think that's the most flexible, obvious one to learn. I guess that's my opinion there.
Great, thank you. Let's see here. Java B, along with the language questions, like to know how does Node.js and JSON play into this, or does it really not?
I'm totally agnostic to how, so the things I'm recommending, and this is kind of an API question, I'm totally agnostic to the way that it's implemented as long as it's implemented somehow. So it's a whole separate question about how should you implement it. I'm a huge fan of RESTful APIs. I think it's pave the cow path kind of approach that works across a huge range of use cases. And to me, I'm all about flexibility, not painting yourself into a corner. And while a REST API isn't perfect for everything, I think it's perfect for so many things that it's a great default. And how you implement the REST API, you could use Relay on Rails, you could use Sinatra, you could use Python, there's a million ways you could do it. And I don't think that matters. I don't think it matters much. I think that is something that you should use the language or the framework that you're most comfortable with, and you can get the most things done, as long as it's not going to paint you into a corner. So I guess it's sort of a gray area, but yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And just a couple more questions here. Wayne says, even with all this information available, excluding proprietary info, one needs education and knowledge to be able to understand the available information. He says, of course, now much education is free, but time and effort still need to educate oneself. Maybe it's more of a comment. He says he's weary of becoming too dependent on the net or the cloud. Isn't over-dependency a danger?
How do you feel about electricity? We're totally dependent on electricity, and if we were going to say, well, geez, we're getting really dependent on electricity, what would happen if we didn't have electricity? If we lived our lives like that, what would society look like? So I think at a certain point, I think we're beyond the point where the internet is going to go away. We've seen repressive regimes try and shut it off, and they couldn't even do it because it was so damaging to their own infrastructure. I do believe we are at the point, certainly in the U.S., but getting there elsewhere, that it is safe to assume that you have a connection. That's not to say that you shouldn't have a backup plan, as we do with electricity. You might have a generator, you might have whatever it is. I'm not saying don't have a backup plan, but to be too nervous about, like my comment before about outsourcing my memory to the internet. I mean, I have plenty of friends that like refuse to be on Facebook because they just don't believe in the concept of like cloud and privacy and all that stuff that people complain about with Facebook, for example. I just don't think. I think that's a generational thing. Like my 3-year-old, he's never going to think about that. He's not going to know what offline is. There's going to be no concept of online and offline, or even connected. It's just it's just always. It's going to be like fish in water. So give it 5 years or 10 years, and no one's going to know what offline was.
Super. And with that, folks, we're going to say a really big thank you to Jonathan for presenting a truly fascinating webcast. It was most informative and fun. Thank you, Jonathan.
Cool. I hope it was helpful.
Folks that attended, thank you so much for attending the event, and we hope you benefited from it. And as I'm looking through all the comments you folks are sending in, you did have a very good time today, and Jonathan, lots of thank yous and great webcast, they're saying.
Awesome. Hit me up on Twitter if you have more questions.
We'll push all that out to you here in just one moment, folks, how you can contact Jonathan after the event. Also, we'd like to let you know if you didn't open your group chat, please do open it. We pushed out a code to you all to save you some money as a thank you for attending the webcast today. Jonathan has some very amazing books that can really help you with your day-to-day and get you moving forward probably with your technology and your wearable computers as you're programming those things away. He's got his Building iPhone apps with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and is building Android apps with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So really good books there, really can help you with your day-to-day, and a code to save you money on that. Folks, keep an eye out on your email and visit our webcast page because Jonathan is going to do another webcast with us next month, July 31st. We'll have details posted shortly, so check back. Again, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, everyone. This will conclude today's webcast. Goodbye, everybody.